in the way of service. But let me start by doing a prayer from the Quran, the first chapter of the Quran. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Malik Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم الصراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. So my dear friends, in the Quran, it says that Allah, the God of all of humanity, is all generous, the Lord of grace abounding, the best of providers. So why is it that sometimes we human beings who are infused with the breath of divinity, we can be less than generous? So one reason is that we are unaware, not conscious enough. Here's a quote by Rumi: "He who begrudges water to the thirsty, he who begrudges water to the thirsty is unaware of the mighty river flowing next to him." That's one reason. Another reason is that I might be so entangled in what the Quran calls ego hoarding, just wanting to hoard whatever I have, money, titles, power. And of course, this is an endless chasm I fall into. Hazrat Ali said, if you give someone, a greedy person, 2 valleys of gold, he will yearn for a 3rd valley of gold. There's a saying that a darvish is a pious person on the threshold of both worlds. A darvish will happily share his blanket with 4 people, but a greedy king, you give him 3 kingdoms and he will plot and conspire to get a 4th kingdom. And a 3rd reason is sometimes we are impatient in our dealings with others. The very classic story is of 2 beggars who knock on a door, and the master opens the door and gives a loaf of bread to one of the beggars, and the other beggar is just kept waiting and waiting and waiting, and the beggar says, "What is lacking within me that a loaf of bread was given to the other beggar, but not to me?" But unknown to this beggar, what is happening is, inside the house, they are baking a fresh loaf of bread for this beggar. So may we be patient. Now the question is, I mentioned Allah, the God of all of humanity, is the Lord of grace abounding. Is God generous? Really? Well, of course, the Quran says, which of your Lord's blessings will you deny? All that you have is from divinity. And Islam itself means to surrender, to bring divinity in the center of your life rather than your ego. And I love that saying by Rumi, who says, go for this divine exchange, bring divinity into your life, that all compassionate, all generous God. Where will you find a customer like God? Jamal, where will you find a customer like God who pays in gold, who accepts your counterfeit coins, who buys your dirty, shabby bag of goods, and in return gives a spiritual spring so delicious that even sugar is jealous of its sweetness? Now, I remember many years ago, at least 3 decades ago, I was giving the same talk about how compassionate God is to a small group of people. And as soon as the talk was finished, this very wonderful lady, she took my hand literally and said, "Come with me." And we were not far from Children's Hospital. And she took me to Children's Hospital, and I just followed her. And she took me to the ward after ward after ward after ward of little children suffering terribly from cancer. She said, "Forget about God being compassionate, generous. Is it really a God? What did these little innocent children do to deserve this fate?" Thank God, I just kept quiet. I was in total silence. But I thought about it. And what gives me comfort is that insight that is in the Quran, where it says, God, before sending humanity to earth, brought all of the unborn humanity and said, "Am I not your sustainer?" And we all said, "Yes, yes, yes," we testify. And then the tradition goes on to say, this is not in the Quran, this is the extra Quranic tradition, that God took all of this unborn humanity to a cosmic tree on which, on the limbs of the tree were packages of suffering, packages of different size, very small, medium-sized, big packages, all of suffering. And God said, "You know, I'm sending you to earth. It's a world of opposites. There will be joy and there will be suffering. These are packages of different sizes. So before you go down to earth, take one of those packages. And the more nobler ones among us, they chose to take the bigger packages." And so the insight is, when you see somebody suffering unbearably and there is no explanation, don't look for explanations. Don't try to analyze. Just be of service with the deepest of gratitude that they chose to suffer and spared us. Do it with a sense of deep gratitude. Okay, my friends, what does the Quran say about giving? The Quran says there are 3 gateways, actually 4 gateways. One is give freely of what you love. Give freely of what you love. Number 2, give to those who ask, and those who don't ask or cannot ask. Third one is give quietly, without any fanfare, if possible. Don't make a show of it. This will atone for some of your wrongdoings. And the fourth one is, in your giving, can you strive to give in such a way where literally and metaphorically you free a slave from bondage? Can you contribute in your generosity in such a way you make structural changes? So let's just look at 1 or 2 of those. One is give freely of what you love. And this is not just about money. It could be your kindness, your time, your energy, or as Prophet Muhammad said, something to gladden the heart of another. Mother Teresa was fond of saying that when she would pick up these terribly inflicted people who are neglected, who are dying, She said, their greatest need is not your money. Their greatest need is your love, your kindness, your presence, your human touch. This is the ultimate act of generosity to those people. You know, I always talk about my experience with, I'll never forget her name, Janet Turner, who was in hospice, and I was her companion, being with her as often as I could. And I would, if you remember, I would read Rumi poetry. I would talk about all the insight from all the different wisdom traditions. And then one day, she grabbed my hand very feebly, and she said, you know, Jamal, I thank you so much for your Rumi poetry, for your wisdom, insights. But what I really need from you is for you just to be present. And she explained, because I asked her, and again, in a very wavering voice, she said, you know, if you feel awkward, be awkward. Your awkwardness is healing for me. If you're speechless, be speechless. That is utterly healing for me. If you feel like crying, cry. That is utterly healing for me. What she really wanted from me was my authentic presence. About structural changes. What does the Quran mean? That in your giving, see if you can make some structural, fundamental changes. The insight which comes to me is when I was visiting my homeland, Bangladesh, I'd heard of this lady who was really trying to help these poor and illiterate children from the villages who would stream into the city just to find a job. And they're young kids, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, 13 years old, trying to find a job in a household. And they wouldn't even ask for money as long as they get food to eat. And this young lady, she said she wanted to make a structural change in her giving. She established a school and subsequently many more schools just for these poor, disadvantaged, illiterate children. And she'd go to every household, and she had a lot of volunteers who would knock on the door and tell the master or the mistress, can you please spare your servant, these little children, during the siesta hours when you're sleeping. Everybody sleeps in the afternoon. For the 2 or 3 hours you're sleeping, please give permission for these illiterate poor children to come to me in my school. I want to teach them. I want to educate them. You see, what she was doing was she was making a structural change to lift these children out of poverty by giving them a basic education. She wanted to make a structural change. You know, about a collective structural change, I read the New York Times daily, and I'm so surprised, pleasantly surprised. There was this article by this columnist, Nicholas Kristof. What can Biden's plan do for poverty? Look to Bangladesh. Was the head of the article. And what the article was referring to is that in this poor country of Bangladesh, the country has focused on really being generous in their giving, in their services to the most marginalized people in the community. Who are they? These are the women, always neglected. But Bangladesh took a governmental policy, for example, to offer free education to women from kindergarten all the way up to university. They advocate for the women for better wages and better living conditions. And what this has done is, over the decades, this has phenomenally increased the growth rate of Bangladesh and reduced poverty simply by the government generously investing in the marginalized. Okay, so what else does the Quran say about generosity? The Quran says, in a metaphor, it says, a hand, a fist that is always closed is as crippled as a hand that is always open. Understand this about generosity. There has to be a balance in the hand being open and the hand being closed. I'm reminded of this story, teaching story of a Sufi who came to visit a village where the villagers were so scared, terrorized by this snake that would bite them, poisonous snake. And the Sufi, who knew the language of animals, went and talked to the snake and said, be nonviolent, be generous in your attitude. Stop this biting, give it up. And that snake gave up biting. And the Sufi went away. And he came back after a year to the same village, and he found this snake in a very ragged, pitiable condition. He said, what happened to you? He said, well, ever since you asked me not to bite people, the children, they practiced throwing stones at me. The adults, they kick me. What did you teach me? And the Sufi master said, listen, I asked you to stop biting. When did I ever ask you to stop hissing? So just be with that story. The other story about this sense of balance is a true story of the very famous 7th century Caliph Harun al-Rashid. And he was with his aide walking through a garden. Actually, he was on horseback, and he saw this hunched over old man very painstakingly planting saplings of date trees. Date trees take a long time to bear fruit. And he said, old man, I really admire what you're doing. He said, well, we have eaten from what our forefathers planted for us. It is my duty to plant for my descendants. And the Caliph was so excited and so happy, he took a purse of coins and just flung it to him. And the old man said, very poetically, he said, wow, these saplings which take years to bear fruits, they've already borne fruit. And the Caliph was so pleased, he took another bag of coins and flung it to him. And then the poor old man eloquently said, trees normally bear fruit only once a year, but these have produced 2 crops in 1 year. Again, he was so obligated by these beautiful words. He took a bag of coins and flung it to the old man, but then he whispered to his aide, oh aide, let's get out of here as quickly as possible before this man leaves us penniless. So my friends, in the area of balance, I'm just reminded, I was not thinking about this mullahs. I love mullah stories where the teaching is that, because of our human nature, sometimes because of the generosity of others, we take their generosity for granted. Don't take it for granted. The story is that Mullah and hundreds of his followers, or not followers, but his co-workers, they worked for this very big company that was very profitable. And one day the owner of the company, he gathered the hundreds of employees and said, you know, from today, all the work of the factory is going to become automated. We have robotics that will take your place. We don't need you anymore. And there was a big gasp, meaning all of these hundreds of people will be unemployed. But the owner said, don't worry, we have made so much profit. And because of this robotics, automation, we shall continue to make so much profit that you will continue to get your salary till the day you die. So come on Fridays to receive your salary. And there was a lot of celebration, but the mullah, of course, put his hand up and asked, but you don't mean every Friday, do you? That's the end of the story. You don't mean that we have to come every single Friday? And also, talking of balance, the Sufi sages remind us that don't think that the generosity of God is on a linear scale. If you don't understand what I'm saying, neither do I, because this is one of the mysteries of God, of God's generosity. So it's best understood through a story. The mullah, who is a peasant, looks also very poor in his appearance, goes to a bathhouse. In those days, he used to go to bathhouses for taking shower. And in the bathhouse, the attendants, they give you massage and beautiful soap and perfume. But because he's so poor, the attendants, the two attendants there, they just totally neglected him. But when the mullah was about, when he was leaving, he gave each of the attendant a gold coin, and they were shocked. They each received a gold coin. A month later, the mullah came back, and of course, these attendants, they recognized him. They rushed to him, and they gave him the best of massage, the best of perfumes, the most expensive of soaps, took total care of him. And as the mullah left, he gave each of the two attendants a measly copper coin, saying, this was for last time, and what I gave you the last time is for this time. And that's the end of the story. See if you can really grasp that meaning. I wanted to mention, I'm looking at the time also, mention one hadith from the Prophet Muhammad who said, do good deeds according to your capacity. God never tires of giving rewards unless you tire of doing good deeds. The good deeds most loved by God are the ones that are done regularly, no matter how small they are. And there's a teaching in the Quran, in some other verses, that says, particularly when you are in times of affliction, distress, continue, don't stop doing good deeds. Remember, according to your capacity, do whatever you can. Rumi says, from a blind man, 2 drops of light are enough. The Quran says, even in times of distress, worst of situation you're in, 2 things remember: continue being of service according to your capacity. And number 2, don't give up on your spiritual practices, on your prayers, on your devotion to God. Rumi says, even in those times, remember particularly to be in attendance at the divine court. And of course, the Quran says again and again, any good deeds you do, any generosity you offer is multiplied many times over, not only on earth, but particularly in the hereafter. In fact, those of you who study different religions will know that in Hinduism, this is a path to enlightenment, karma yoga. You can become self-realized, one with God, become completely enlightened through the path of service on one condition, not to be attached to the fruits of that service, not to be attached to the money or the prestige or the titles that the service brings. Okay, just one or two more points before I come to an end. We cannot forget the generosity that animals offer us. They sacrifice their lives to fulfill our, shall I say, addiction to meat. So the least we can do is, can we always, before we eat meat, offer our deepest gratitude to these animals. And of course, I cannot say enough about nature and the environment, how generous, how selflessly they offer us life and nourishment. The Prophet Muhammad said, the earth is like your mother. Honor her, protect her. So may we offer our gratitude to the generosity of Mother Earth. And the last point I want to make is, if you were to ask this question, who is the most generous on planet Earth? The Quran would say it's mothers. In the Quran, whenever there's a verse that says, revere Allah or pay respect to Allah, it's immediately followed by, and also revere the wombs that bore you. Prophet Muhammad said, paradise lies at the feet of your mother. I believe it is Prophet Muhammad, I could be wrong, who said, some great sage said this, that you cannot repay all your life your mother for what she has suffered even during, this is Prophet Muhammad who said it, for the suffering your mother has experienced in taking care of you even for one night. And this enraged one person who said, you know, what if I carry my infirm mother on my back for all her life? And the Prophet said, there will be this difference, that your mother offered you service, generosity, in order for you to live. And you offer her generosity, waiting for her to die. I love very much this one poetry which says that a million times you have heard that when God created humanity, God was a little bewildered. How can I be present at the same time with billions of people all over the world? And then God had a wonderful idea. I shall create a mother who will be present with everybody. And everybody thinks this is beautiful, this is wonderful, that's the end of the story. But this lyricist, this poet goes on to say, let me tell you the real story. It goes on. You might think that God rejoiced at making such a decision. The truth is, God regretted and was saddened by this decision. You see, it was the province of God, it was the magic of God, it was the beauty of God to offer muhabbat, meaning love, unconditional love. But mothers began to give muhabbat. It was the magic of God to offer hifazat, devotion. Mothers began to give devotion. It was the magic of God to offer barakat, blessings. Mothers began to give blessings to the children. Mothers, they assumed the status of parvardigar. In Persian, it means divinity. And God said, what have I done? I have become beruzgar. I have become beruzgar, said God, which means I have become devoid, bereft of my source of livelihood. I have become unemployed. The last point I want to make is we have no idea of the joy our soul feels in being of service. So I want to end with this quotation, which I quote all the time, by Tagore, who says, I slept and dreamt life was joy. I awoke and found life was service. I served and lo, behold, service was joy. Just be with that for a few seconds. And since I've gone over my time, I'll do a very short meditation. Just close your eyes. And focus on your nostril and simply be present with your breath as you inhale and as you exhale. Just this much, present with your breath. And now, letting go of this, focus now on the lowest part of your spine, the sacrum area, and through intention, send a beautiful cord of divine light flowing from the sacrum area, going down, way down, deep, deep, deep into Mother Earth, connecting us to the womb of Mother Earth, feeling rooted, grounded, a sense of belonging. Okay, letting go of this. Focusing now on the crown of the head. And again, through intention, sending out a beautiful cord of divine light going upwards, way up, higher, higher, even higher, piercing the mysterious realms, connecting us to the heart of heaven. Feel that bonding connection. Okay, letting go of that. And now focusing on your heart. And from the heart, making an intention to generously, voluminously pour out, send out, radiate out light and love from your heart. pouring out light and love from the heart, which is a source of infinite supply of light and love. Light and love pouring out in an outward, expansive direction. I'll do a chant, and at the end of the chant, please open your eyes. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah.